All right, you know that feeling, right? The one where your executive leadership drops, like impossible targets on your desk, targets they've clearly never even tried to hit themselves. Then, when your team can't pull off miracles with literally zero new resources, who gets blamed? You. It's like you're told to manage up while simultaneously supporting your people, and those two directions are constantly pulling you in entirely opposite, soul-crushing ways. Does it ever feel like the game is rigged?
Oh, absolutely. It's a universal experience for so many professionals, especially, those caught in that squeeze of middle management. The inherent contradictions are almost designed to make you feel like you're failing, even when you're doing everything right, or trying to.
That's exactly the feeling we're diving into today. And this isn't your typical business school deep dive. We're not pulling from management textbooks. Instead, we found three truly unique source materials, not standard business texts at all, but rather satirical tabletop role-playing games. Now, you've told me these games offer surprising and frankly hilarious insights into the very real mechanics of corporate suffering and, believe it or not, survival. What made you even consider looking at tabletop RPGs for corporate insights? Seems unusual.
It sounds wild, doesn't it? But what I realized is that these games, in absurdity, they actually distill the core mechanics of corporate suffering and the middle manager's dilemma maybe better than any textbook could. Our mission today is to explore the nature of that rigged game through these systems. By analyzing their deliberately absurd yet eerily familiar mechanics, we're going to uncover some universal truths about middle management, understand why the game feels so rigged, and perhaps even discover some deliberate ways you can play it.
I love that. Playing a rigged game deliberately. So let's unpack this. Our first stop in this corporate fantasy land is a game called Dungeons Incorporated.
Yeah.
What struck you most about how this game immediately dives into the absurdities of middle management beyond just the concept of a fantasy dungeon?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the game immediately throws you into a world of absurdities that mirror real corporate life with chilling accuracy. You're a middle manager, but instead of a cubicle farm, you're managing this sprawling fantasy dungeon for the Dark Lord. Your bosses hand down impossible key performance indicators, or KPIs, right? And below you, you're dealing with a truly delightful cast, sentient traps, unionized mimics, and incredibly disgruntled ghouls. The game throws you into what it calls create curses phases each cycle, which are essentially just new crises emerging constantly.
Like what kind of crises?
We're talking about skeletons demanding dental coverage, or the trap maintenance union demanding hazard pay for existentially dangerous pit traps.
Wait, union-approved screaming? That's hilarious. What other ridiculous details did you find in the rule book that just screamed corporate satire?
Oh, it gets even better. According to the game's cursed handbook of stakeholder alignment, all screaming in the dungeon has to be union-approved and thematically consistent.
Right.
And if you want to do a team-building exercise, it's trust falls over pit traps, but you have to, and I quote, sign Form 13C to waive liability for accidental impalement.
Oh my God.
Plus, they even threw in CPA verification needed for all virgin sacrifices per SOX 579CY. For compliance.
That's wow. CPA verification for sacrifices.
Uh,
I can just picture the HR memo now.
mm,
So how do you measure success or maybe just avoid total collapse in this chaotic dungeon?
the game introduces the Dungeon Performance Index, or DPI. You start with 5 DPI, and if it ever hits 0, your dungeon collapses and you're probably toast. A success adds 1 DPI. A partial success means the problem lingers as a hangover with grim consequences later.
So it comes back to bite you.
Exactly. And a failure. That drops your DPI by 2 and adds grim points to your manager. This mechanic perfectly captures that constant pressure cooker environment of trying to keep performance metrics above water, even when everything around you is fundamentally broken or actively working against you.
Brutal. It sounds like you're constantly fighting this uphill battle against absurd, self-inflicted chaos. Okay, let's pivot to our second fantastical yet horrifyingly familiar workplace. Horn and Fetlocks, Inc. This game puts you in a magical beauty product company. Middle managers again. But this time, your task is to commodify purity itself.
Exactly. And much like the dungeon, this game doesn't shy away from the surreal. You're dealing with your own set of impossible rainbow performance index targets. You navigate union disputes, but this time it's with sentient mascara wands, and you're fending off FDA investigations into whether your authentically magical ingredients are, well, actually authentic.
Sentient mascara wands.
The source material even notes that focus groups question whether your horn polish is contributing to unrealistic beauty standards in the Enchanted Forest. It's all about navigating glamour cycles and dealing with shareholder alignment issues that feel just as nonsensical, just as impossible as any dungeon curse.
It sounds like the same kind of pressure. Yeah, just with more glitter instead of slime, maybe.
Hmm.
What's chilling about both these games, beyond the fantastic satire, is how deeply ingrained that feeling of never-ending work truly is, isn't it?
Absolutely. Both of these games, despite their dragons and unicorns, are described in their designer notes as satirical love letters to workplace dysfunction and a critique of neoliberal exploitation. And their core mechanics are explicitly designed to make players experience capitalist exploitation through gameplay, where, just like real corporate life, no failure is ever truly resolved.
It never ends.
Right. It forces you to confront the idea that in some systems, solving a problem isn't about resolution, it's really about managing its persistence, just keeping it from blowing up today.
That brings us directly into the mechanics of why the game feels so rigged. What rules really highlight that for the player? How does it make you feel that?
Well, both games feature an office politics phase or beauty politics phase. This is key. Here, players nominate a department not their own as a blocker for a crisis.
Not their own department, of course.
Never your own. This adds doom or glitter, basically penalty points to that other department's resolution role, making it harder for them to succeed.
And you have to narrate why. I love the example. Purity Standards didn't approve our inclusive unicorn campaign, so now the Pegasus Union is picketing. So this isn't just flavor, it's a concrete mechanic showing how interdepartmental blame and backstabbing are literally baked into the system you're playing.
Exactly. You're incentivized to pass the buck, not solve the problem collaboratively.
Fix it.
And then there's the hangover effect in Dungeons, Inc., or glitter residue in Horn and Fetlocks, Inc. This is where partially resolved or failed curses and crises don't just disappear, they carry forward. They become worse over time.
Oh, look.
Yeah. You know, the sentient mold is back and it's angrier, or you have to attend a mandatory lessons learned about authentic allyship meeting. It perfectly illustrates how in corporate life, problems rarely truly go away. They just morph or escalate or resurface in new, more painful forms later on.
So it's not just that the problems stick around, but they actively get worse if not fully resolved.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The Lumberg rule. This is an explicit rule in both games, and it's just brilliant. What happens if you use corporate jargon?
It's the ultimate satirical punishment. If you use any corporate jargon, those buzzwords we all secretly cringe at but feel compelled to use, things like synergy, leveraging best practices, or optimizing bandwidth.
Oh, God, bandwidth.
Right. You immediately land yourself in the role of abused project manager or designated scapegoat manager for the next cycle. The designer notes for Dungeons, Inc., put it bluntly, the curse of middle management is speaking like middle management.
Wow. And it sounds like the beauty industry version is even more pointed.
It is. Horn and Fetlocks, Inc. adds, the curse of beauty industry middle management is speaking like you're changing the world while perpetuating the exact systems you claim to be disrupting.
Oof.
Yeah. It's a direct commentary on that performative language that often masks a lack of real progress or even actively perpetuates harm. It highlights how using that language isn't just harmless, it reinforces the very system that creates all this dysfunction.
So you're trying to keep the dungeon from collapsing or the magical beauty empire from imploding, and all these failures and political maneuvering give you grim points or sparkle points.
Yeah.
Get too many, and your manager has a breakdown. Okay? And if you accumulate career trauma points, this is where the game truly twists the knife. You get promoted to a worse job.
Yes, you can become a director of despair or director of impossible standards, but the most perverse example comes from Horn and Fetlocks, Inc., with the dreaded exceeds expectations review.
The dreaded exceeds expectations. That sounds wrong.
It is. If you're too good at the job, like so good at psychological manipulation that you actually raise concerns about your own psychological state, you get promoted. You become the regional director of despair with mandatory therapy.
That's horrifyingly accurate. The game explicitly states, no healthy individual should be this good at our job. What does that say about the corporate reward system as a whole? It's basically saying success is the problem.
It paints a stark picture, doesn't it? It implies that true success in these highly dysfunctional environments isn't about genuine productivity or well-being, but about a willingness to sacrifice your own ethics, empathy, maybe even your mental health. The system essentially promotes the individuals most adept at navigating or even exploiting its brokenness, creating this perverse incentive structure where the best performers are maybe those whose moral compass has been thoroughly suppressed or warped.
That's a deep, dark thought, but it resonates. And that brings us to our third source, Monster Hearts, Corporate Edition. This game sounds like it provides a deeper, more psychological lens into the toll of corporate life. What's its core premise?
Its premise is stark, yeah. You survived adolescence, but the real horror started when you got the job. Your monstrosity hasn't gone away. You've just gotten better at pretending. This game reimagines classic monster archetypes as corporate skins, or roles, each with their own internal struggles, embodying the ways we adapt and sometimes distort ourselves to fit into these corporate structures.
That hits home for so many people, I bet. Can you give us some examples of these corporate skins? What monsters are walking the halls?
Certainly. There's the ghoul, who is described as burned out and running on cold brew and spite. Something died in you, but you're still here. Their darkest self. Lose all sense of consequence. Start replying all with the truth.
Oh, wow. The nuclear option.
Pretty much. Then there's the critic. You see everything, you understand the game, you speak both languages fluently, the language of resistance and the language of the machine. The core horror of the critic is that total awareness. You can generate perfect corporate speak while simultaneously deconstructing it in your head.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And their darkest self is terrifying. You become so good at seeing the system that you've become part of it, with your scathing analyses of corporate culture getting turned into, like, corporate training materials.
That's chilling. Your rebellion becoming part of the machine. And don't forget the Hollow, who is custom built for team cohesion. You have no hobbies. You win awards for best attitude.
Yeah.
Their darkest self is to vanish completely into someone else's expectations. Just become the job.
Exactly. The game also introduces basic moves like schedule a meeting, cold, to exert control, delay confrontation, or create obligation, or the ever-dangerous reply all, volatile, with something volatile, honest, or inappropriate. These show how subtle power dynamics and risks are just baked into every interaction, every email.
The strategic meeting invite, I know that one.
Monster Hearts. Corporate Edition also introduces the company generator. This concept perfectly captures the surreal nature of many workplaces where, honestly, no one knows what the company actually does. Its core values are often contradictory, like radical transparency alongside results over reality.
Oh, this is fantastic. It asks, what does it say it does versus what does it actually do? For instance, a company might say, we monetize authenticity at scale. But what it actually does is psychic research funded through the wellness budget.
Yep.
That's the perfect encapsulation of the corporate doublespeak that we all intuitively recognize. The mission statement versus the weird reality.
And there's a powerful optional rule called the exit interview. A character can monologue their truth when they resign. Give the big speech. You'd think so. But on a miss, the system absorbs their rebellion and brands it as thought leadership.
Oh, no.
Yeah. This mechanic brilliantly illustrates how even genuine attempts at change or defiance can be co-opted, neutralized, and then repackaged by the system itself. It's a reminder that the corporation is this resilient entity, capable of turning even dissent into a marketable product or a LinkedIn post.
That idea of co-option brings us to the most insightful, perhaps most challenging part of this deep dive, the idea of a heist in reverse. The designer's notes for Monster Hearts. Corporate Edition argue that late-stage capitalism systematically appropriates and weaponizes elements of queer energy. What does that mean exactly? That sounds complex.
It's a profound insight, yeah. The game suggests that concepts originally rooted in queer experience and theory, like fluid identity, get sort of hollowed out and rebranded as personal branding or professional pivoting for your career path, or radical intimacy becomes psychological safety, or maybe those awkward trust exercises in a corporate training seminar.
Right, I see.
Even transformative anger, righteous anger, gets sanitized into innovation and disruption, but only in ways that drive profits. The monstrous irony here, according to the notes, is that corporate managers using these very techniques genuinely believe they're still the rebels, but they've internalized the heist so completely that they can't see they're both victim and perpetrator. They're unknowingly complicit in the system that's weaponizing these concepts against their original genuine intent.
So if the system is essentially stealing your authentic self or these powerful concepts and repackaging them for profit, what's left? Where do you find resistance when even rebellion can be monetized or turned into thought leadership?
That's the core question. The game introduces this concept of joy that learned to code switch and frames snark is joy wearing body armor.
Snark is joy wearing body armor. I like that.
It's about subtle, almost undetectable forms of resistance. The idea is that every eye roll in a meeting is a tiny rebellion. Every sarcastic Slack response is joy finding a way to survive.
Thing.
This is about playing the rigged game deliberately, finding forms of resistance that the corporate machine can't metabolize because it just reads them as negativity or poor attitude, even as they build community and connection among those who truly understand what's going on.
That makes so much sense. This entire deep dive, then, through these fantastical, satirical games, highlights a core idea.
Hmm.
Understanding these dynamics becomes a heist in reverse, not stealing something from the corporation, but stealing yourself back from what the corporation has made you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing the game, seeing the rules, the real rules for what they are, and finding ways to survive with your true self intact, even within a system designed to consume it.
Exactly. So we've journeyed through, dungeons full of HR nightmares, surreal beauty empires, and the fluorescent lit horror of the modern office, all through these games. These satirical systems, though exaggerated, they really do illuminate the very real, often absurd, and psychologically taxing realities of middle management.
Yeah. The core insight is clear. The game often feels rigged because, well, in many ways it is. It's designed with inherent contradictions and pressures that relentlessly push managers towards burnout, or ethical compromise, or just a profound loss of self.
So the next time you find yourself navigating these impossible demands, maybe ask yourself, as Horn Fetlocks Inc. suggests in its post-game reflection questions, how do you maintain personal ethics while working within systems designed to commodify insecurity? Or perhaps even more powerfully, building on Monster Hearts, consider what you can still reclaim from what the corporation has made you become. And how can you use that awareness to find those genuine moments of a snarky, resistant joy?